And what happened over those 10 Liberal years? The per capita GDP in Canada was the worst of any G7 country. Then, after COVID was over, they began spending on deficit dollars on things unrelated to COVID, and they said it was an investment.
Could a non-confidence vote be coming much sooner than expected, where the Carney Liberal government may fall? Yeah, actually, given this new piece of information. I'm Jasmine Lane. Subscribe, like, follow, and comment your thoughts down below. As always, share this video. You know, it's so funny to hear the Liberals and all of their pundits talking so frequently about Canada's sovereignty. That's always the excuse, right? It's our sovereignty. Yeah, but the pattern we have seen for so many years under this Liberal government is that when they cannot deliver prosperity because they have nothing but terrible ideas that usually cause more harm than good, which we will be getting into thanks to a new Auditor General report, they reach for more control, which is actually the deeper sovereignty problem that we have.
That the federal government has surrendered everything. Anybody can check. Counter tariffs, frontiers, defense, taxes on the giants of the web, and now opening to some negotiations, which of course are not good for Quebecers and Canadians. And Mr. Carney, who has been elected, saying, I'm the new hero. I'll come from the sky with a cape. I will start negotiation 1 week before the election. I will fix the tariffs, and I will start a negotiation for a new trade agreement. 6 months later, we have seen nothing of it. Nothing of it. And I will remind to everybody that those projects that he wants to go forward with against the rules and the provinces and Quebec will not change the economy of Canada before years after Mr. Trump is no more President of the United States. So some questions have to start being asked quite seriously.
I think that it is truly just so obvious what is happening here and the reality of bad policy. That's about it. In terms of Imperial Oil, who announced they're cutting about 20% of their workforce, which will equal thousands of jobs in Alberta, production targets have stayed the same. And I thought it was so disingenuous. This message from Tim Hodgson, who writes, I am deeply disappointed to learn of Imperial Oil's decision to lay off hundreds of workers in Calgary. Talks about, how skilled they are. And obviously it's devastating. Canada's new government is laser focused on building new major energy projects, supporting energy workers and unlocking new export markets for our resources so that we can become an energy superpower. We're taking steps today to ensure the Canadian energy sector will continue to provide careers and prosperity for generations to come. In a time of global upheaval, wow. What a technocratic top-down approach, fear-mongering word that is. It is my mission to keep our energy and natural resource industries prosperous and productive. We're urgently working to better understand the factors behind the company's decision and to explore ways to support affected employees. Holy crap, you don't know? You don't know the factors behind the company's decision. That's crazy. I'm pretty sure he does. I'm pretty damn sure that he does. And that tells you that the problem isn't geology or lack of demand. The problem is the business environment.
We have the worst economy in North America. 60 out of 60 when you look at GDP per capita.
The Premier of Nova Scotia, Tim Houston, who says that, yes, Nova Scotia has the worst economy in the G7. And then in this article, he boasts about how he totally defends his record $1.2 billion deficit, saying that he's laser focused on growing the economy and making major investments in healthcare. Inside of this article, he also says that he's super excited about windmills, a project they just announced a few weeks back. And so we have one part of the country shedding real energy jobs and another part that's betting its entire future on projects that won't produce a dime for years, cost an insane amount of money, all while Ottawa calls it sovereignty to hand out billion-dollar loans. This right here is the perfect picture of Canada's energy strategy right now, which is laid off workers, rising deficits, and politicians promising prosperity in some distant future that doesn't currently exist, only if we just keep spending a little bit more money today.
If you want to develop the revenues in order to be able to pay for the things we all care about, which is education, healthcare, infrastructure, you have to generate the wealth to be able to do it. We've been going down a path for the past 10 years where governments in Ottawa felt that they could just create money out of thin air. It's led to the inflation crisis. It has led to the decline in our standard of living. It's led to fleeing capital, and is part of the reason why we had, at the beginning of this evening, somebody talking about the very serious danger that the federal government might become unviable. We have to get back to the idea that you have to create wealth before you can spend it.
If we were really building an energy superpower, like the US is, as an example, capital and jobs would be coming to Canada, not leaving overseas, not leaving to our neighbor. Ottawa keeps promising prosperity, right? They keep promising all this stuff, but all they do is deliver a climate of uncertainty, high costs, and slow approvals. And some people will say, they'll try to criticize, well, why is it always about oil? I don't know, because it works. Because it's one of our biggest shares of our economy, actually, the exports of it. It's 25% of Canada's export economy. So, yeah, focusing on energy isn't being stuck in the past. It's about keeping the economy strong enough today, while, sure, investing in other things on the side when you have the revenue from that massive revenue driver in order to do that.
No other country, and importantly, no major oil or gas producing country, has imposed an absolute cap federally on its own production. Not the United States, Canada's biggest energy customer and competitor because of the last anti-development Liberal decade that killed at least 4 Canadian pipelines, dozens of LNG projects, turned the world away from Canada, and drove hundreds of thousands of jobs and billions in major projects out of our country. Not Norway, not Saudi Arabia, not a single OPEC nation made up of hostile, anti-freedom regimes with lower and often non-existent environmental and human rights standards.
If you've got money sitting in a savings account, a 401k, or IRA, this message could determine whether you retire comfortably or not at all. This episode is brought to you by Noble Gold Investments. And you know me, I like straight talk and no fluff. That is especially true when it comes to protecting your money. And gold is as real as it gets. Wall Street gives you numbers on a screen. Gold is real. It's in your name, and it has been trusted for over 5,000 years. Here's what I like most about Noble Gold. They let you use your retirement funds to own physical gold, not just paper promises. Your gold is stored separately in secure, regulated vaults in Texas or Delaware, and you can even visit to see and hold it yourself. Try doing that with where you're currently storing your money. If you want a retirement investment that's real and not just numbers on a screen, go to jasminegold.com or call 877-646-5347 to get your free wealth protection kit. Remember that all investing carries risk. Nothing is guaranteed, but with Noble Gold, at least you can see, touch, and hold your future.
The Liberals, 20 months and 3 weeks ago, said the the Canadian oil and gas cap was, quote, bold climate leadership. But common sense conservatives saw it for what it was, an unprecedented, arbitrary production cap, the only one of its kind in the entire world, self-harm to Canada by our own federal government.
Self-harm, self-sabotage, what? How on earth could they get away with all of that?
Now, we haven't heard from the president on the 51st state comments since Carney and Trump met in the Oval Office, between the meeting between those two leaders. What's your take? Why now?
You could almost feel this coming. You know, if you look at the arc of the last few days, these sort of random tariff announcements with no detail, they don't seem to make any sense. In part, you know, they affect Canada, but many other countries. And, you know, standing before all these military leaders, this grand spectacle that looks like something of a sort of tin pot dictator show, you can tell the president wants to boast about his lacking roar record. He wants to boast about territorial expansion. So, of course, the 51st state idea comes up. And sometimes you have to wonder if Donald Trump wants to be president of the United States in 2025 or 1825. because between tariffs and territorial expansion, these sound like the agenda of a president from the 19th century.
CBC also did an entire panel on this in true CBC fashion. I'm not going to play all of it, but one moment in particular did stick out for me, and that was one of their panelists kind of calling them out for how much they are giving this attention when Donald Trump didn't threaten annexation. No, he said, Canada called me. I told them, hey, may as well just become a 51st state. Come join us. It's pretty different than threatening violence to take over your neighbor.
A little bit. This speech today, I think you're presenting it in a more coherent fashion by clipping it the way we are than it really was, right? I mean, it was a bit of a rambling greatest hits in the same way he laid out at the United Nations. He enjoys creating this chaos. He enjoys creating this attention on himself. And I do think we have to be a little bit wary about giving it to him every time he asks for it.
I'll be completely frank. There is nothing, as far as I can tell from covering this for so many years of my life now, that is more clear as day to how weak you are, how bad your leverage is, that you would focus that heavily on the president of the United States of America, of whom imposed tariffs, not just on you, on pretty well the entire globe, and of whom you do actually have about 95% of completely tariff-free trade or incredibly low tariffs, that you would spend so much time hyperfixating on that. Weird. I wonder how good of a standing you're in, because as far as I can tell, if you were truly, truly a strong nation, if you had the backbone and if you were doing good things for your people, you would not even bat an eyelash at Donald Trump saying anything about 51st state. The fact that we react so much is pure weakness. If Canada did that to the United States, do you want to know how they would react? They'd probably laugh at us, and it would never make news outside of that first laugh. That's it. Because they're strong. And if we didn't have a governing body over the last decade that ruled based on fear and division, manipulation, misleading, insults, you name it, we could be that strong too.
You know, yes, you're saying you're going to cut spending. I understand that. Do you need to invest a ton in order to spur economic growth? Or are there, other things you can do in concert to maybe mitigate some of the level of investment? Like, I'm not sure. It seems like we'll wait till November to find out the answer, but what is your thought?
Yeah, I mean, look, he will, I think, offer to try to do some of that. But there's clear evidence that there are some failed government policies that aren't working, that are bad for the economy and wasting a lot of money. I mean, the Build Canada Homes project that Marco just outlined, I mean, it's great. They're booking $14 billion. It's great in thematics. But if you look at the development community across Canada, they're all looking at this and saying, this is crazy. This doesn't make any sense. $14 billion for a few thousand homes, like, it doesn't make any sense at all. And the scale of spend is as outrageous relative to what the return would be. This is a supply and demand issue with all kinds of regional development issues that doesn't require $14 billion from the government of Canada to be funneled through a bureaucracy. It's a bad policy. And we've already spent $750 million, as you talked about yesterday on your show, Vashi, $750 million on a gun buyback program that hasn't recaptured a single firearm in this country or made anybody safer. Like, if you can't admit the obvious stuff that has failed is all around you, and you can't sort of reverse course on those policies. The Prime Minister has shown some leadership and done that on carbon pricing and a few other policies that made sense to reverse on. But on the spending side, I hope there is some courage shown in the November budget, because there's some debris at his feet that is easy to sweep aside, of failed policies that cost a lot of money, that would do a lot of good in order to get our fiscal balance back in the right direction.
Failed policies that always spend more money that they don't have to help those that are in need of certain things, because they keep on spending more money that they don't have, right? And so the $10 a day childcare is a really wonderful example of that. And of course, yes, I know there are people who are on it where it's really beneficial for them. To that, I say fantastic. Really sucks for the people who don't have a spot and are sitting on a 4-year wait list now, when previously that wait list would have been substantially lower. Also, really bad for all of the centers. This is well-documented public record that have had to close their doors because they cannot keep up with the costs of taking care of all of these kids on top of the federal subsidy and only charging $10 a day. And, the Auditor General just came out with a report, which I'll put up on screen here, that highlights some of the major problems with this program. program. And as former MP Michelle Frary writes on X, she says, breaking, the Auditor General confirmed what Conservatives knew from day one. The Liberals promised $10 a day childcare, but families who need it most aren't getting it. Waitlists have exploded, spaces sit empty, and low-income families are being shut out. This was never about kids or parents. It was a vote-buying scheme the Liberals could never afford, and now families are paying the price. And it goes back to that thing. Oh, the Conservatives, they always vote against these things. Yeah, because it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? When it doesn't work at all, and that is proved years later, makes a lot of sense to have voted against a bad policy. You're not voting against helping struggling kids and families. In fact, the Conservatives are the only party who can explain to you in a way that makes sense in simple language with a plan to actually make Canada's economy better. Of course, it would take some time whenever they get in, but they have a plan that works, that's proven, that follows the trends, that follows the money on how to make it so that Canadians don't need to rely on $10 a day childcare because they are suffering so bad.
As for this business of investing, okay, this is nothing new. I encourage you all to go look back at the video reel of the Liberal ministers and of Justin Trudeau's 2015 election campaign.
These investments have been put off for far too long. They're vital if we want to grow the economy.
And what happened over those 10 Liberal years? The per capita GDP in Canada was the worst of any G7 country. Then, after COVID was over, they began spending on deficit dollars on things unrelated to COVID, and they said it was an investment. What happened? Our GDP per capita grew at the lowest rate in the G7, and we had the worst inflation in 40 years. So now Mark Carney is repeating the same Liberal talking points of the last 10 years, claiming that when he borrows and spends, it is an investment.
That's why today I'm announcing a new approach to how we manage the budget. And the essence of this is to spend less and invest more.
The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Frankly, the only difference between Mark Carney's deficit spending and Justin Trudeau's is that Carney's is much higher and much more irresponsible. We need to unlock the free enterprise system where businesses have low taxes, fast permits, access to markets so that they can build. We should have the fastest building permits anywhere in the world so that money-making projects that create wealth for our people can be unleashed. So I propose we pass the Canadian Sovereignty Act, which will make this the best place in the world to open a steel mill, dig a mine, build a pipeline, export our resources, expand a port. That is how we will unlock real private sector investment that generates revenue for the government rather than generating costs for taxpayers and consumers.
And that right there is truly the greatest problem with a population in which we do not have much of a political culture here. People are not politically active. People don't really participate in democracy. In fact, you often get smeared and shamed when you do. And that problem is that people don't know. And they're so foolish to not do their research about people beforehand. And as we see with Mark Carney, it's just the same old, same old. Of course it is, though, because those of us who have taken the time to do our research to read his book, we know what's coming. We know what is the fault of all of these things, and it's all strictly politics. There is no reason other than politics why Canada is in the position that it is. But so many Canadians are just unaware. They're blinded by it. And the thought process is like, oh, well, everybody's telling me that the people on the right or even center are these radical ists and phobes. I don't want to be anything like them. So I'm not even going to allow my brain to remotely think like they might be onto something, because then I might be ousted. I might be shamed. I might then be ostracized from my community.
They lied to these people. And then the Liberals have the audacity to call Canadians racist. Well, I actually think what they did to those students and to the temporary foreign workers that are being exploited today, that is racist. By creating an underclass of low-wage, impoverished workers whose rights are systematically violated, that to me is racial injustice.
And in failing to use your democratic right in a way that is responsible and thoughtful and educated, in failing to do all those things that keep our nation on the right path, because that is our job as citizens of this country, is to question authority so that it doesn't go unchecked. In failing to do all of that, we end up in a situation like we are today. We end up with a total lack of critical thinking. We end up with this hive and herd mentality when it comes to politics on things that don't make sense, that are public records, so easy to disprove, but you get so caught up in all of it, and emotions don't think. And the Liberals have really seemed to play on that emotions do not think. I'm a good person because I'm a Liberal, and I'm a Liberal because I'm a good person. That is a mentality that has really taken over all Commonwealth countries, as well as, the United States, which isn't a Commonwealth, but just English-speaking nations, is something where that's really worked. And I think that a lot of that has to come from people not having a set of values and morals and principles that they hold themselves and everybody else to. I think that there's so much psychologically or sociologically behind that, and it's really sad to witness, and it's exactly why I do what I do. But I do see maybe some hope. I don't know. This was pretty interesting coming from the Bloc regarding the budget.
On the budget, how are pre-budget consultations going with the government?
There's none. The government did some private pre-budget consultations. And like in anything else, they will decide privately in the PMO what will be in the budget, and Mr. Champagne will say, okay, I will convey that to the population. But there was none. And they don't want to do a budget in the spring. So they don't want to speak to anybody about what they intend to do, and they will face Canadians and Quebecers with an unbelievable deficit, which looks like madness. So there is no consultations, and there will be no legitimacy to this budget.
So because of that, do you feel like you can't support it no matter what's in it?
I will see what's in it before I support it or not. But, as I said, I don't see how. I cannot see how we could support a budget which is first based on some taxes reductions, electoral gifts, and some fantasies in many regards. I cannot support that. I don't see how we could support that. And one has to calculate what will be the cost of the debt of the federal government year after year. So far, I believe that there will be, and they should take note of it, 22 MPs from the Bloc Québécois that will vote no.
So at that point, perhaps it's all up to the NDP. And we will see how that goes. But in theory, could there be a vote of non-confidence with the budget? That's certainly possible. I don't know how I feel about that yet. I mostly think it's a terrible idea. I know that people really want there to be an election because you want Conservatives to win. I don't think Conservatives will win if we get an election right now. I really don't. I think what will happen is a supermajority for the Liberals, because people are so egotistically high and they're like so boisterous right now. And I don't think it will go the way that we really need it to go in order for things to change in this country. I could be wrong, but that's just my analysis of it at this point in time. I'm Jasmine Lane. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe, like, follow, and comment your thoughts down below. As always, share this video, and I will be back with you tomorrow.